4 people tried to destroy my life, and somehow they ended up saving it instead. I know that sounds insane. How can the same people who ruined everything be the reason I'm still standing? But if you stay till the end, you'll understand why. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how far people will go when jealousy starts to eat at love. Back then, my life looked perfect from the outside. I had a good job, a few close friends I trusted like family, and a future that finally felt secure. Their names were Claire, James, Victor, and Lila. We weren't just co-workers, we were a team. Late nights, coffee runs, birthdays, and those after-hours talks that made work feel like home. We shared everything: laughter, secrets, dreams. I thought we were unbreakable. I used to believe betrayal was loud, screaming, slamming doors, broken trust out in the open. But I was wrong. Betrayal is quiet. It whispers through jokes, smiles too wide, and congratulations that sound almost rehearsed. The first sign came the day I got promoted. Everyone clapped, but the air felt wrong. It was like applause at a funeral, polite but empty. That night my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "Proud of you. You really pulled it off." I stared at that emoji for a long time, and for some reason, it didn't feel like support. It felt like warning. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things that didn't add up. The group chat that used to ping all night went quiet. Lunch plans suddenly happened without me. And every time I walked into a room, conversation stopped mid-sentence. I told myself I was imagining it. That work stress was making me paranoid. But deep down, I could feel it. Something was changing. I didn't know it then, but I was already walking straight into the trap they'd been setting for months. Because sometimes, the people you'd take a bullet for are the same ones quietly loading the gun behind your back. The morning after the announcement, the office felt different. Maybe it was me, maybe it was them, but I could feel the weight of eyes on me everywhere I went. Claire was the first to speak when I walked in. "Look at you, boss lady," she said. "Don't forget us little people when you move to the top." Her tone was light, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. James followed, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. Guess staying late finally paid off. He didn't mean it as a compliment. I could tell. Lila's laugh came next. "You really surprised them with this one." Then, quieter, "Surprised all of us." I told myself they were joking, but when laughter starts sounding like accusation, you stop wanting to laugh back. I worked harder than ever after that. Longer hours, extra calls, extra reports. I wanted to prove I'd earned it. But proving yourself to people who've already decided not to believe you feels like trying to shout through glass. At lunch, the 4 of them would sit together. They'd wave me over sometimes, but by the time I joined them, the conversation would fade into silence. Then Claire would change the subject, and everyone would start talking again, as if nothing happened. I told myself I didn't care, that I was stronger than gossip, but the truth is, even the strongest person still bleeds when they're cut from behind. One Friday afternoon, I stayed late to finish a report. When I went to print it, the machine wouldn't stop spitting out pages that weren't mine. Receipts, memos, notes, all marked with my name at the top, but none of them written by me. I flipped through them, confused. Fake email chains, signatures I didn't remember signing, and one message that made my stomach turn. "She's getting too comfortable in that seat. Time to remind her how replaceable she really is." The sender's initials were VL, Victor and Lila. I remember standing there under the flickering lights, holding those pages, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. That was the night I realized it wasn't jealousy anymore. It was war. But I had no idea how far they'd already gone, because by the next week, those same fake papers would end up on my boss's desk, and my entire career would collapse overnight. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was halfway through a client report when the HR manager's name flashed on my phone. I didn't think much of it at first. I just approved a new campaign. Maybe they needed paperwork, but her voice told me everything before her words did. "Could you come to my office for a quick chat?" Quick chats never stay quick when the air already feels heavy. When I walked in, 2 people were waiting. The HR manager and my department head. Neither of them smiled. There was a thin folder on the table, my name written neatly across the front. Inside it, the same forged documents I'd found on the printer a few nights earlier. "We've received multiple complaints," the HR manager began, "alleging misuse of company funds, unprofessional conduct, and favoritism." For a second, I couldn't even breathe. "That's not true," I said quietly. "Those aren't my documents." She nodded slowly, the kind of nod that says she's heard every excuse before. "I understand this is difficult, But we have statements from 4 employees who've corroborated the details. 4. That word echoed in my head like a gunshot. Who? I whispered, even though I already knew. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Claire, James, Victor, and Lila. 4 names, 4 signatures, 4 daggers in my back. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to tell them how much I'd sacrifice for this job, for these people. But instead, I just sat there in silence. Because sometimes, when the world starts collapsing around you, your voice is the first thing it takes. They suspended me pending investigation. That's what they called it. I called it humiliation wrapped in polite paperwork. When I left the building that day, I didn't take the elevator. I walked down all 10 flights of stairs, each step heavier than the last. By the time I reached the lobby, I wasn't angry yet, just empty. Outside, the rain had started. I stood there with my box of office things, watching cars pass, realizing that everything I'd built, every late night, every weekend spent working instead of living, was gone because of 4 people I once would have died for. That night, I didn't eat, didn't sleep. I just sat on the floor, surrounded by my old notebooks and photos of us smiling at parties. I stared at those faces until they blurred. I kept asking myself one question: why me? But the truth was simpler than I wanted to admit. They didn't hate me because I'd done something wrong. They hated me because I'd done something right, and it reminded them of what they hadn't. Still, what I didn't know was that losing everything wasn't the end. It was the beginning, because buried somewhere in the chaos they created was the truth that would bring all 4 of them down. Have you ever felt that silence from people who once cheered for you? The kind that makes you realize the friendship you trusted might have already ended long before you noticed? Tell me below. I'm reading every story tonight. The days that followed felt like walking through fog, each one heavier, slower, and quieter than the last. People stopped calling. Texts went unanswered. Even my own family avoided the topic. The world doesn't comfort you when it thinks you've fallen. It just watches. Everywhere I went, I could feel it. That shift in the air when people recognized me. The lowered voices, the pitying looks, like I'd become a walking cautionary tale. I spent hours staring at my ceiling, trying to remember what I'd done wrong. What moment had turned 4 people who once loved me into a jury determined to destroy me? I kept replaying everything in my mind. Claire's awkward smiles, Lila's forced laughter, James's quiet resentment, Victor's silence that always seemed too safe. I wanted to hate them, but I couldn't. You don't just unlove people because they've hurt you. You just start to love them differently, like ghosts you still talk to when no one's around. Bills started piling up. The company had frozen my pay until further notice. My lawyer said the investigation could take months. I didn't have months. I barely had the strength to get out of bed. One night, around 2 a.m., I sat by the window with a cup of cold coffee. The city lights blurred through the rain, and I caught my reflection in the glass. For the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. That's when my laptop chimed, a notification sound that cut straight through the silence. It was an email, no subject, no sender name, just 3 words. Check your drive. I frowned, probably spam, but something about it, the timing, the simplicity, made my heart race. I hesitated for a few seconds, then opened it. There was a single link and a password typed beneath it. Truth. My hands shook as I clicked. At first, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared on my screen, filled with files, reports, screenshots, and bank statements I'd never seen before. Every one of them connected to my department. Every one of them linked to the people who'd signed those reports against me. I scrolled deeper, faster, my breath catching with every new file name that appeared, until I saw it, a folder labeled Project Haven. The same project they'd accused me of mishandling. And when I opened it, my whole world tilted on its axis, because in that folder were 4 names, and beside each one, a signature. Not mine, not fake, theirs. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My eyes scanned the names again and again, like maybe if I looked long enough, they'd change. But they didn't. Claire, James, Victor, Lila, 4 names, 4 signatures, 4 people who had sworn to be my friends. Each document told a story: fake vendor contracts, falsified budgets, and payment trails that led to accounts I didn't recognize. But the company names were oddly familiar. When I looked closer, I froze. The initials, the dates, the invoices, they were all tied to Project Haven, the same project they'd accused me of mishandling. The one that had gotten me suspended? They hadn't reported me because I'd done something wrong. They'd reported me to keep anyone from looking at them. My hands were shaking so badly that the mouse slipped from my fingers. The sound it made when it hit the desk startled me. A small, ugly reminder that this was real. For weeks I'd been living in darkness, thinking I was the villain of someone else's story. Now I was staring at proof that I had been their shield, the cover they used to hide their crimes. The more I clicked, the deeper it went. Transaction after transaction, hidden payments, altered spreadsheets, everything disguised to look like my work. They'd even used my login. That's why the audit had pointed back at me. They'd planned it so carefully, down to the smallest detail. Every move I made, every report I sent was being copied, edited, twisted. It wasn't sabotage, it was strategy. I scrolled all the way down to the last file. It was a scanned note, handwritten, dated 2 weeks before my suspension. 5 short lines in Claire's handwriting. Everything's ready. Once she's gone, we'll fix the rest. No one will ever trace it back. She's too trusting to question us. See. I sat there completely still. The only sound was the rain tapping against the window. I wasn't sure if I wanted to scream or laugh, because the truth wasn't just ugly, it was personal. They hadn't destroyed me by accident. They'd done it because they knew I'd never fight back. They'd counted on my loyalty, on my silence. But what they didn't count on was that silence can break, and when it does, it's louder than anything else in the world. Because the moment I found those files, I stopped being their victim. And without realizing it, I became the one thing they never expected, their reckoning. I didn't move for almost an hour. The glow from my laptop screen was the only light in the room, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than fear. Anger. Pure, quiet anger. It wasn't the kind that screams or breaks things. It was colder, heavier. The kind that sits in your chest like a secret, waiting for the right moment to breathe. I kept staring at those files. Proof of everything they'd done. Evidence that could end their careers. Maybe even their freedom. Part of me wanted to hit send right there. Expose them. Watch everything they'd built crumble the way they'd done to me. But another part hesitated. Because once I did, there would be no turning back. I thought about my mother. How she always said, "Don't fight dirt with dirt. It'll just bury you both." She believed in karma, in patience, in letting the truth reveal itself. But karma had taken its time, and I'd already been buried. I needed help. Someone who could verify what I was seeing. Someone inside the company who still believed in me. That's when I remembered Mason. He worked in IT security, quiet, reliable, one of the few people who'd called to check on me after I was suspended. I found his number, hesitated for a second, then called. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, you okay?" I took a shaky breath. "Not really, but I think I just found something." I told him everything, the email, the folder, the files. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Where did you get this?" he asked finally. "Anonymous email." "Then whoever sent it wants this to come out," he said. "But you have to be careful. If those files came from inside, someone's already watching." "So, what do I do?" "You gather everything," he said. "Don't confront them. Don't warn them. Just make sure when you move, it's permanent." We agreed to meet the next day. I backed up every file to an external drive and locked it in a drawer. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the city outside. It's strange. The moment you stop being afraid of the people who hurt you, you stop being their victim. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. Because when you've already lost everything, revenge stops feeling like anger. It starts feeling like justice. If you were in my place, holding proof that your friends framed you, would you confront them face to face? Or expose them quietly and watch from a distance? Tell me below. I really want to know how you'd handle it. The next morning, the city felt different. It wasn't brighter, but it felt clearer. Like the fog that had been hanging over me for months was finally lifting. Mason met me at a small diner on the edge of town. We sat in the back booth, the kind of place where the walls could keep secrets. He had his laptop open before I'd even ordered coffee. "Okay," he said quietly. "Show me what you've got." I slid him the flash drive. He plugged it in, his fingers moving fast. The reflection of the screen flickered across his glasses, and every time he scrolled, his face grew a little more serious. "This is bad," he muttered. They weren't just moving money around. They created shell companies, fake vendors, false payments, layered accounts. This is corporate-level fraud. My stomach twisted. and they used my name for all of it. He nodded slowly. They used your system login, your employee ID, and even your timestamps. It's clean. Too clean. Whoever planned this knew exactly how the audits work. I sat back, gripping the edge of the table. Everything I'd lost, my career, my friends, my peace, was buried beneath their lies. But now I had something they didn't. Proof. Can you trace it? I asked. Can you show it's not me? I can, Mason said. But you can't go through HR, they're already compromised. If we expose this from inside, it'll disappear before it reaches the top. Then how do we do it? He looked up at me. We go public, but not in your name. We'll leak it anonymously to the audit board, copy it to the company's external accountants, and one version straight to their director's personal email. I hesitated. You really think that'll work? I don't think, he said. I know. It was risky, but the risk felt better than silence. Silence had almost killed me. We spent the rest of the afternoon setting it up. Multiple email routes, anonymous VPN layers, encrypted attachments. Mason was meticulous. By the time the sun began to set, the plan was ready. He turned his laptop toward me. You sure you're ready for this? I was ready the day they lied, I said. He hit send. We watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, each percentage point feeling like a heartbeat. When it reached 100%, we just stared at each other. No cheers, no smiles, just quiet understanding. Because the moment you expose a lie, you can never go back to pretending it didn't exist. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared of what would happen next, but because I already knew it had begun. By the next morning, the company was buzzing like a disturbed hive. I didn't need to check the news feed. The flood of notifications told me everything. Urgent meeting. Internal audit announced. Compliance review. All department heads present. The leak had worked. From my window, I could almost imagine the chaos unfolding in that glass building. People whispering in corridors. Directors pacing with their phones pressed to their ears. HR pretending everything was fine. I brewed coffee, sat down, and waited. For once, the waiting didn't feel helpless. It felt powerful. By noon, my phone started buzzing. First, a message from James. We need to talk, please, it's important. Then, from Lila. You don't understand what you've done. They're coming for all of us. Claire called 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. Victor never called, but I knew he was panicking too. He was always the quiet one, the kind who made plans but never took responsibility when they collapsed. I sat there, watching their names flash on the screen like ghosts from a life I'd already buried. Every vibration of the phone felt like payback echoing through the walls. By evening, social media had caught wind of it. An anonymous report had reached the press, a mid-level fraud case tied to my company's biggest campaign of the year. No names, no details. Just enough truth to send the upper floor into meltdown. Mason texted me. It's working. They're pulling logs, checking accounts. By tomorrow, everyone's fingerprints will be on record. I stared at his message for a long time. Part of me felt relief. The other part felt something heavier. Because revenge, even when it's justified, doesn't always feel good. It just feels necessary. That night, I sat on my couch with my laptop open, watching the news refresh every few minutes. Somewhere between exhaustion and disbelief, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. The truth had finally started to breathe. And once the truth starts breathing, it doesn't stop. But what I didn't realize yet was that when you expose a lie that big, you don't just free yourself, you set fire to everything connected to it. The email came the next morning. The subject line was simple. Meeting request. Immediate. It was from the same HR manager who had suspended me. The same woman who couldn't meet my eyes that day in her office. We'd like you to come in for a discussion regarding the ongoing audit. I read that line 3 times, heart thudding like it was trying to climb out of my chest. I'd waited months for this, for them to finally say my name without shame attached to it. But now that the moment had arrived, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like walking into a battlefield you'd already died on once. Mason met me at the cafe before I went in. He handed me a small USB drive. Backup copy, he said, in case they pretend not to know what's happening. He paused. And in case something goes wrong. I smiled weakly. Something always does. Walking back into that office was like stepping into an old dream turned nightmare. Same gray walls, same polished floors, but every face looked different now. The same people who once smiled at me now watched me like I was a ghost, haunting the place. I walked straight to the conference room. The the one with the long glass table where we used to celebrate birthdays and promotions. This time, there were no balloons. Just 4 familiar faces waiting on the other side. Claire, James, Lila, Victor. None of them could look at me. HR sat at the head of the table, flanked by the finance director and 2 auditors. Their laptops were open, screens reflecting lines of data that could destroy lives in seconds. The HR manager cleared her throat. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Hayes. We wanted to discuss some new findings from the audit." I nodded, sitting down slowly. "Of course." The director turned one of the screens toward me. Rows of numbers, invoices, and transaction IDs filled the display. Every payment I'd supposedly authorized. Except this time, the digital fingerprints didn't match mine. The director folded his hands. "It appears the reports we received earlier were inaccurate. The actual source of the irregularities seems to trace back to other employees." Across the table, I heard someone gasp. Lila's hand shot to her mouth. Claire's eyes darted toward James, and Victor just stared straight ahead, frozen. I didn't say a word. I just watched them, the way they shifted in their seats, the way guilt looked when it finally realized it had nowhere left to hide. The HR manager continued. "Until the investigation concludes, your suspension has been lifted. We sincerely apologize for any distress this situation has caused." I nodded once. "Distress?" I repeated quietly. "That's one word for it." But what they didn't know was that I hadn't come back for an apology. I'd come back to watch every single one of them face the truth they'd buried me for. The room was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your skin and dares you to speak first. Outside, you could hear phones ringing, people pretending to work, the hum of a company trying to act normal while it burned from the inside. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. "You know," I said quietly, "I used to dream of sitting at this table again. But in my dream, you were proud of me." Claire's eyes filled instantly, but she didn't look at me. Her gaze stayed fixed on the folder in front of her, the one with her name printed neatly on the tab. "This isn't what it looks like," James said, his voice trembling. "We didn't mean for this to happen." I almost laughed. "You didn't mean for what exactly? For me to lose my job, my reputation, or for your plan to finally get caught?" Lila's voice cracked. "We were desperate. The company was cutting positions. Victor said if we could hide the numbers just until the next quarter. Don't you dare," I cut in. "Don't you dare act like this was survival. You made me the target because I was easy to blame." Victor looked up finally. His voice was cold. "You were too trusting. You never checked what we sent you. That's why it worked." That was the first honest thing he'd said all day. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the anger shaking through me. "You're right. I didn't check. Because I believed in you. I thought loyalty still meant something." The finance director interrupted softly. "We have everything we need for the report." I nodded, still staring at them. "Good. Then let them know exactly what kind of people you hired." Claire finally broke. "Please. I never wanted it to go this far. We panicked. We thought you'd be okay." "I wasn't," I said, "but I will be. Because now, the truth is finally louder than your lies." I stood to leave, but before I reached the door, I turned back. "One day you'll understand what you destroyed wasn't just a job. It was trust. And once trust is gone, nothing's ever really left." I walked out before they could reply. Behind me, I could hear the muffled sound of Claire sobbing and the director's voice calling for security. But I didn't look back, because the moment I walked out of that room, I thought it was finally over. I was wrong. The aftermath hadn't even started yet. The next few days felt like standing in the middle of a collapsing building, watching pieces of your old life fall all around you, but somehow knowing you'll survive it this time. News spread fast, an internal memo leaked, and by Monday morning, the company's name was all over the business blogs. Fraud under investigation. Employees suspended pending criminal review. I didn't even have to check who they were talking about. I already knew. Claire, James, Victor, Lila. They'd been escorted out of the office that morning, boxes in their hands, faces pale, heads down. Mason called to tell me. "You did it," he said softly. "It's over." But it didn't feel over, it felt empty, because victory isn't as sweet when it's built on ashes. I sat on my balcony that evening, watching the city lights blink below. For months I'd wanted this moment, the truth out, the liars exposed. But now that it was here, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like grief. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Birthday dinners, team celebrations, Claire and I laughing so hard at something stupid we couldn't breathe. How do you mourn people who are still alive? Just as I set my phone down, it rang. A number I hadn't seen in months. Claire. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something inside me said answer. Hello? Her voice was small, fragile. They're talking about pressing charges, she said quietly. I just wanted to tell you. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. The words didn't come. We didn't think it would go this far, she continued. It was supposed to be temporary. Victor said we'd fix it before anyone noticed. We were scared, and when they found out, we panicked. I panicked. I could hear her crying softly on the other end. I ruined you, she whispered. And somehow you still came back stronger. I don't know how you did it. Because I had to, I said. Because if I didn't stand up for myself, I would have let you rewrite my story. Silence. Then, in a voice so broken it almost hurt to hear, I hope someday you'll forgive me. The line went dead before I could answer. And maybe that was for the best, because I didn't know yet if forgiveness was even possible. But that night, as I sat there alone, I realized forgiveness wasn't the ending to this story. It was the next battle I'd have to face. Have you ever forgiven someone who never asked for it until it was too late? Because sometimes the hardest part of healing is realizing you might have to forgive people who'll never make it right. It's strange what happens after the storm passes. The world doesn't suddenly feel bright again. It just quiets. And in that silence, you start to hear yourself for the first time. The company offered me a settlement a few weeks later. Compensation for damages to your career and reputation, the letter said. Money can't replace peace, but peace doesn't pay rent either, so I signed it. But instead of using it to rebuild the life I'd lost, I decided to build something new. For years, I'd helped that company grow, giving my ideas, my energy, my loyalty. Now I wanted to use all that for myself. I started a small consulting firm, nothing fancy, just a desk, a laptop, and a promise. I would never let anyone make me feel small again. It began slow. One client, then two. But somehow, word spread. People who'd been burned by corporate politics, people who'd been betrayed or overlooked, started finding me. Every story sounded different, but they all carried the same kind of pain. Trust broken, voices silenced, worth questioned. Helping them gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Some nights I'd stay in the office after hours, watching the city lights outside my window, thinking about how far I'd come from that broken version of myself. Then, one evening, I got another email. This time, it wasn't anonymous. It was from Lila. I heard what you've built, it said. If our mistakes helped you get there, maybe that's the only good thing we ever did. I didn't reply, but I sat there staring at that message for a long time. Because she was right. Their betrayal had destroyed the life I knew, but it had also forced me to build one that was finally mine. I wasn't the same person anymore, and I didn't want to be. Because sometimes, the people who break you aren't meant to ruin your story. They're meant to redirect it. A year later, I went back to the cafe across from my old office. The same corner table, the same smell of burnt espresso and paper. Except this time, I wasn't meeting anyone. I just wanted to see what it felt like to sit there again. Not as the woman who'd been betrayed, but as the woman who survived it. I ordered my usual coffee. The barista, a new face, smiled politely. She didn't know my story, and for once I liked it that way. I didn't want to be the victim anymore. I just wanted to exist. While I sat there, I took out my phone and scrolled through old photos one last time. Claire's birthday, James's wedding, Lila's promotion, Victor's housewarming, moments frozen in time. Back when we still believed forever was real. I don't hate them now. I don't even wish them pain, because holding on to anger feels too much like keeping a dead thing alive. What they did taught me something no book or mentor ever could. Sometimes life doesn't give you closure, it gives you clarity. Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It came in small moments. In every morning I woke up without bitterness. In every breath I took without replaying the past. Forgiving them wasn't for them, it was for me. And if you've ever been betrayed, you'll understand this. Revenge might make you feel powerful, but forgiveness makes you feel free. I paid for my coffee, stepped outside, and looked up at the building one last time. The same glass walls, the same reflection staring back. But now, I saw something different. Peace. Because in the end, the real revenge isn't watching them fall. It's living a life they can never destroy again. If this story reached you tonight, don't scroll away just yet. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever been broken by someone, only to realize later they helped you become stronger? Your story might be the one that helps someone else heal. Thank you for listening to Unlimited Mind Stories. Subscribe for more stories that remind us the people who break you might just be the ones who make you unbreakable.